When you play the Game of Thrones, you
Subscribe and like.
or you die. There is no middle ground.
Alright, hello YouTube, and welcome back to the Grease Goblin YouTube channel. In today's video, we're going to be talking about Varus. About 2 weeks ago, we did Littlefinger, so I thought I'd bring you guys the kind of other spy master and big player of the game. So, getting into this video, what we're going to be talking about is a lot of the kind of secret plots and things I think Varus has going on and going into Winds of Winter. Like I talk about a lot on this channel, I think Littlefinger has been kind of the one that's winning the game between these two. In the earlier books, now I think it's Varys' turn. I think a lot of Varys' kind of plans are going to come to a head in this next book. Now, starting off, let's have a little recap. So Varys ends out A Dance with Dragons, the last official chapter we have seen from George R.R. Martin. The other ones that we've gotten from Winds have been... they're kind of like sample chapters. They are prone to be rewritten and all that stuff. But that Varys chapter at the end, we see through Kevin Lannister's eyes, and Varys is up to some shit, right? He's just disrupting King's Landing. He's creating chaos, trying to pit Cersei and the Tyrells even more against each other, and making it to where it's going to be nice and easy for good old Aegon to come in and win. So, yeah, but before we get into this video, if you guys like to subscribe, like, and comment, please do. It helps the channel grow, reach your feel that might like this content as well. And let's get into it. So, Varys. Now, Varys to me is an interesting character because he's someone that preaches, oh, for the good of the realm, I want peace. I don't want the common people to suffer. But if we look at Varys as a character, we can go all the way back to the Mad King. Varys completely undermines Rhaegar. Rhaegar was going to basically assemble all of these lords together at Harrenhal and was going to, I guess, it's kind of made known that he was going to try and take the throne from Aerys, or kind of plan out how his reign was going to go. And Varys ends up telling that to the Mad King, which is why the Mad King goes to Harrenhal unexpected, destroys all of Rhaegar's plans. And if Varys had not told the Mad King of that, I think things would have gone very differently. So that's the first king he betrays. Now the second one we have is Robert Baratheon. He is constantly undermining Robert Baratheon with everything going on with the Dany. So Robert Baratheon, for the most part, his reign was actually fairly peaceful. And this is what I don't understand on Varys' whole ideology of, oh, I just want peace and I want the common folk. The common folk live pretty well under Robert Baratheon. Yes, Robert Baratheon was not a good king. And yes, the crown was going into debt and all these other things like corruption was going on. But for the average person in Westeros, they were having a good time. There was not really a lot of war going on. We did have Balon's kind of rebellion and the Greyjoy Rebellion, but again, you know, it's the Greyjoys. They're prone to a rebellion every, 30 years or so. But yeah, if we look at history for the most part, having a nice, 20-year period where there really isn't a whole lot of conflict going on is a pretty good time. And Varys is constantly undermining this at all times, right? And leading to pushing Ned, figuring out, or not pushing, but kind of helping him along with all the Jon Arryn stuff and all that, alongside Littlefinger. And even to the point of having Dany marry the Dothraki, planning for them to invade as well. With Aegon, it just, again, undermining there at that point. And then after this point, I guess it's okay because Joffrey was a terrible king. The people were not doing well under Joffrey. And he did, undermine, I guess, Tommen. I don't know which one you want to say he undermined when he kind of releases Tyrion and all that stuff. So again, Varys has betrayed 4 kings up to this point. Tommen is now betrayed. He's basically betrayed because of everything that just went on in King's Landing as well. So we have now this idea that Varys doesn't really care about the people. That's just a front he puts up. He doesn't really give a shit. So the question is, what does Varys care about? Now, let's look at Dany and Viserys, because they're two very important characters when looking at Varys. And I want to point out that Dany and Viserys live on the run, not great lives, especially early on, and they are not really pampered by kind of Varys and Illyrio. Maybe later on when they're staying, but that's because, as Dany kind of rightfully thinks, they want something from them. And that is basically she's going to marry, the Dothraki or Khal Drogo, get them married off. It gets Viserys and Daenerys out of like Illyrio's hair and all that stuff. And what I have always thought of when you look at when the Aegon thing happens is that Dany was supposed to, actually it was supposed to be Viserys who ended up doing it, but bringing across the Dothraki, if possible, and just creating chaos within Westeros. Having all of the Westerosi lords already kind of be at each other's throats, like the Lannisters and Starks and the Baratheons, but then also adding in the Dothraki. So then the plan was, I believe, with the Golden Company already having this prior knowledge that Aegon was going to come there, because again, it's very odd that the Golden Company just, oh yeah, we're for Aegon, fine. Even when they don't support Targaryens, like Daenerys and Viserys have been looking for an army for a long time. Viserys, I believe, even went to the Golden Company and they kind of laughed at him. So it's like, okay, you're willing to go with Aegon, but why? So again, I think there was this whole idea that Varys and Illyrio were going to have Aegon come over after this point with a civilized Golden Company army, an army of Westerosi that are trying to come back to their homes and play on that sympathy card and basically show that, okay, the Lords of Westeros don't give a shit about you. They're causing all this war. They're causing all these problems, and all of that. And that was going to be the idea. Now, again, we know all of this goes wrong, right? We know that, Dany is the one that ends up kind of being the person in charge. Khal Drogo dies before the invasion can start. Dany gets dragons. She gets all these armies. So things definitely go wrong on this plan, and also for Varys, the War of the Five Kings kind of starts a little too early for Varys' liking. But let's see. But as we see through the events that kind of go on, I think Varys has kind of shifted with the game, right? So the first piece of evidence that I want to talk about when we talk about Aegon coming over, because Varys is going to be in Aegon's camp, not in Daenerys' camp. He's made that very clear. Is I think what Varys is doing right now is trying to get a bunch of puppet rulers for Aegon to make it easier to rule the Seven Kingdoms, and also trying to garner him alliances. So we're going to start this off by saying Tyrique, or I like to call him Tyrique Lannister because it sounds cooler. He randomly kind of disappears within a Clash of Kings. There's kind of the riot that happens in King's Landing, and then Tyrique, or Tyrique Lannister, is never kind of seen again. We hear a bunch about him. Characters are constantly asking where he is, in Jaime chapters later on in A Dance with Dragons, or Tyrion chapters with Tywin. It's constantly brought up, but we never see him again. Now, if you guys want to see more in depth about Tyrique Lannister, I would check out my video on him, but just know in this video, I believe that he is alive and that Varys is the one that may or may not have captured him to kind of install as a puppet ruler. Now, it would make a lot of sense because Tyrique Lannister would have a lot of knowledge of the incest between Cersei and Jaime, and could provide more proof of it. And also just kind of knowing and being around Lancel and how the poisoning of the king actually did happen. So giving more knowledge and proof that, the past regime was illegitimate. And also being able to install him on Casterly Rock as the Lannister in power that would be loyal to Aegon. Now, the next branch and element of this is the Stormlands. So we know that Storm's End is taken really by guile, not by an attack, nothing like that. Could Varys, who again would know where Edric Storm is, his spies, and it's also kind of made where we kind of know where Edric is in the story. Could he have found Edric and used him with Aegon to maybe take Storm's End? We know a lot of the people that are at Storm's End right now would have sympathies to Edric, so I think that could be very possible. Could Aegon then maybe install Edric as a Baratheon, and then because of all that knowledge, Edric would then become loyal to Aegon? You would then have two of the Seven Kingdoms that were very much against you at this point, possibly in your hand. Now, the next part of this would be the Dornish. The Dornish as well are probably going to be loyal to Aegon, because I think Arianne and Aegon are probably going to get together. Now, the other elements of this is going to be the North. At this point, Varys is probably not going to give a shit about. They have a bunch of civil wars going on right now anyway. Again, you don't really care at this point. And then the Riverlands, they're just so destroyed at this point. I don't think right now he's worried about them. And then the Vale's kind of in Littlefinger's pocket right now, so Varys can't really do too much there either. So I think with the available kingdoms that Varys can actually look to try and get, he could possibly also get the Reach, depending on how the King's Landing plot goes. Maybe something happens similar to the show where Marjorie gets killed, even though she's not in King's Landing at the moment. Maybe she's killed or something like that. Maybe the Tyrells just openly are just not with the Lannisters anymore. They could also flock to Aegon as well. So, as we see, I think Varys' plan right now is getting a bunch of groups of people together to support Aegon. And then, again, having a bunch of chaos in King's Landing to where it's very similar to the sack of King's Landing, where we see that Aegon actually is faced with quite a little bit of resistance, and it's more of a sack. And then Aegon will sit the crown, or the throne, and that's kind of how it's going to be until Daenerys comes over. Now, Varys at this point, I think, kind of is tied in completely with the Aegon camp. So if Aegon goes down, Varys goes down. Now, for me, I think, alongside most of the community, I think Aegon's going to go down to Daenerys one way or another. Dany has dragons. Maybe it'll be a closer fight, maybe not. It depends on the timing of the White Walker kind of invasion. But for me, I think Varys will end up dying to probably Daenerys, probably like an execution style thing, kind of in the show, but just done way differently and for completely different reasons. But I think that is Varys' fate. I think Varys is eventually going to end up dying in not in Winds of Winter. I think he'll die in A Dream of Spring. But that is kind of the fate of Varys. I think he'll have one big climb up to the Iron Throne with Aegon, and then a very quick descent when Daenerys comes over. So, thank you guys all for watching, and I will see you guys in the next one. Bye, guys.
If you think this has a happy ending, you haven't been paying attention.